What's going on, guys? We gotta talk about Cleanspark's earnings. As we expected, they did post a loss. And here's one thing we didn't expect. No dilution. And they've talked about this, how they plan on utilizing their Bitcoin, not diluting shareholders. And as I've said multiple times, I'll believe it when I see it. Let's roll this clip.
Given our scale, we've evolved from the near 100% HODL strategy adopted in late 2023 and have begun using a portion of monthly Bitcoin production to support operations. This marks a deliberate and disciplined shift, in contrast to peers who continue to fund operations through equity dilution. I want to reiterate, we concluded our outstanding ATM in November last year and have since not issued a single share to capitalize the business. We have no plans to initiate an equity offering given the accretive opportunities available to a company with a strong balance sheet like ours. We remain committed to Bitcoin as a core long-term asset.
And I'll feature a clip later on the Q&A where Gary, the CFO, talks about how they use Bitcoin covered calls to make premium, and the premiums are, and I quote, juicy. And as a side note, let me know, guys, have you sold covered calls on any of your Cleanspark shares, any other Bitcoin mining shares? When we get good pops, the premiums tend to be fantastic. And it is a great strategy to make some premium against positions you hold. And we'll play that clip in a little bit, but here's a quote from Gary. We continue to invest in strategic and accretive expansion without relying on dilutive capital, as demonstrated by our expanded revolving line with Coinbase. Additionally, we maintain one of the most efficient cost structures in the industry. Our digital asset management group made meaningful progress during the quarter and is preparing to optimize our treasury, positioning Bitcoin as both a productive asset and a source of strength on our balance sheet. Now, as I said, they were unprofitable. They had a net loss, $138 million loss, almost 50 cents per share, compared to a net income in the same period last year, compared to a net income in the previous quarter. This is a reminder that Bitcoin miners aren't a sure shot. There is risk. There are times that they are unprofitable. They are not for everybody. Their revenues increased pretty massively from a year ago and also increased quarter to quarter despite Bitcoin's decline. Looking at their balance sheet, they're holding 97 million to the end of the quarter. They hold nearly $1 billion worth of Bitcoin. And as for their mining assets, which means deployed miners, also prepaid deposits, nearly 900 million there, with total assets of $2.7 billion. What about money that they owe? Well, their current liabilities are 109 million. As for their long-term debt, 641 million. Looking at their cash, their Bitcoin, and their line of credit, they have working capital of 838 million, easily enough to service their debt. Now, I highly recommend you guys listen to the call. I will link it down below for you guys, along with their investor relations, with their press release for their earnings. But they did highlight that Bitcoin's performance is a major reason they were unprofitable. And just as we saw almost all of the Bitcoin miners post a profit in Q4, where Bitcoin had a fantastic run, thanks to FASB's rule change, these companies can report unrealized gains on Bitcoin now, not just unrealized losses. However, that didn't matter in this quarter where Bitcoin pulled back. Bitcoin started in the 90s in Q1. Bitcoin ended in the low 80s in Q1. This move is only going to be reflected in our current quarter, or Q2, or I should say Cleanspark's fiscal Q3. This is the second quarter of the year. The Bitcoin miners are very likely to benefit from this quarter. So far, so good. Of course, it's not over. We still have to get through the rest of May and June, of course. But so far, so good. Bitcoin from the beginning of the quarter so far has gained about 20-something%. This is definitely going to benefit the Bitcoin miners in terms of their earnings, whereas last quarter, the quarter just reported, we actually saw a decline for Bitcoin, which was a major reason for those that hold so much Bitcoin, aka Riot, Cleanspark. They posted a loss. This is mostly due to their holdings, which did see a decline in price. But that is mentioned in the call, so make sure you guys listen to it. It is a little under an hour long, but you should be listening to earnings of stocks that you own. As a side note, Bitcoin's moving averages keep getting closer and closer. We are getting so close to that golden cross. This could light a fire under Bitcoin's ass, pardon my language. But look at every time we have seen a golden cross. Look at that run. This will massively benefit the Bitcoin miners if we see what we have seen every time so far this cycle. Looking at Cleanspark, it looks like we just saw a false breakout here. I would not say that we have yet broken out. We tried and we got rejected. So still keep an eye on this falling wedge. I do think it's coming, but perhaps not yet. Cleanspark is in fact guiding for a profit for their following quarter, which isn't surprising considering Bitcoin's price so far. They're expecting a $202 million revenue with a 24-cent EPS, translating to roughly $20 million in revenue growth quarter over quarter and more than $100 million year over year. The big thing for these Bitcoin miners isn't necessarily the revenue growth, it's seeing consistent profitability, which I do think we will see at the end of this year. I'm still a firm believer in Bitcoin cycles, and I do believe Bitcoin is going to end this year breaking new all-time highs, which will translate to some profitable quarters for the Bitcoin miners end of year. Let me remind you guys, when Cleanspark actually saw its massive run was on consistent profitability. It's not going to happen without it. This is what people don't want to listen to. When Cleanspark ran from $4 to $25, this was on quarters of profitability. This was a non-GAAP profit, not a GAAP profit, but look at the following quarters. Profitable quarter, money coming to the company, not money burning from the company. This is what we need to see for Wall Street to be optimistic. We need to see some consistent profitability, not a quarter of profitability and then another quarter of losses, then another quarter of losses, then another quarter of profitability. We need some consistent profitability, and I do believe we are still going to see it. I still do expect to see Bitcoin hit 150K. But you know, during times when we're so overbought on Cleanspark's chart, there's a fantastic time for covered calls. A way to collect premium on the shares that you own. Give you a chance to either acquire more shares or sell some of your shares if those covered calls get assigned. Or executed, I should say. You don't want to necessarily sell covered calls though during pullbacks, during times that you are oversold. If anything, that's a good time for selling cash secured puts if you want to acquire more shares. But if you are sitting on a ton of shares and you don't know what to do, you're not sure if you want to necessarily sell right now, you might be willing to sell at a higher price. And if we're getting a price spike, if we are getting moves up, those are fantastic times to sell covered calls. The premiums tend to be better. And if it keeps running, you have a chance to sell your shares even higher in price, depending on your strike price, while also collecting premium and making money regardless of if those calls are assigned or not. But I guess that was my way of transitioning into this clip of the video where Gary Vee talks about selling covered calls for Bitcoin.
And I'll tell you, there's a number of strategies that we're looking at. The ones you've heard me talk over the past really couple years is something as vanilla as covered calls. Let me share some information that I pulled this morning because we monitor this in real time, and I really can't think of any other word to use other than these premiums are rather juicy. I know it might be a little hard to model juicy sometimes, but let me give you an idea of what excites us here. Bitcoin's trading around 101,000 right now. So if we were to issue covered calls at the money, so with a strike price of 101,000. 1 week out, that's a premium of a little over $2,400 or 2.4%. Annualized, that's 97%. Now, naturally, we wouldn't put the entire Bitcoin balance at risk at the money, but at least a covered call at the money would allow us to always stay ahead of spot by at least a couple points. And we've always been confident we'd be able to do that with this basic strategy. And since we're sellers now of Bitcoin to help pay for operating expenses, that's going to be very important for us to always stay ahead of spot. Additionally, when you start to ladder this out, if you were even to look at, a 2-week strike at 101,000, it's like 3.4%. You go to 102,000 or so, $1,000 out of the money, it's about 3%. So again, those are pretty interesting premiums and again, juicy yields for such short-dated options. But that's just one example of what we're looking at, and ultimately, this is going to generate what we're internally calling this flywheel, this treasury flywheel, that will allow us to generate some cash that we can then have optionality and flexibility as to whether we then further reduce the reliance on selling a production and apply towards operating expenses. We could pay down debt, or we could roll it into other instruments and maybe even into Bitcoin.
Love it. But let me know how you guys are feeling about Cleanspark. Do you expect these Bitcoin miners collectively to see profitability by the end of this year? Throughout the back half of this year, I think Bitcoin is priming itself for a huge move. If we get that golden cross, we are going to see a big reaction from Bitcoin like we have every time this cycle, and that will translate to massive profitability for the Bitcoin miners and an actual reason for Wall Street to be more optimistic and decide to invest in them. And also, one thing to realize is I don't think any retail is buying right now. Retail has their bags packed and they're begrudgingly holding, waiting for moves up. So retail isn't contributing to any moves at all. If anything, retail will be contributing to sell pressure. So that's one thing to just keep in mind. It seems right now like a lot of people are looking for their way out. They aren't happily invested, they're more begrudgingly invested. But let me know in the comments down below if that's you. Were you buying at $24 and now you're begrudgingly holding the bag? Or were you buying during the worst times of the cycle and you're still actually in the green? Let me know in the comments below. Keep an eye on this falling wedge. It does look like a breakout is coming soon. And a good move for Bitcoin could be what brings us out of this pattern. But thanks as always for watching, guys. Let me know what you guys thought about the earnings call. Cleanspark is one of few miners that don't plan on dilution, which is a stark contrast to what we have seen as they were a younger company without these massive Bitcoin holdings that they can utilize for capital. But anyways, I appreciate you guys as always. Have a good weekend and I'll see you next time.